All right, Isaiah 48. Let's get a bird's eye view of the chapter here first of all. As you look at the issues in this chapter, you would realize that God must have been terribly disappointed with his own people whom he had chosen to be a reflection of his own glory and to bring honor unto him, because Israel turned out to be perpetual backsliders. Every opportunity they were off seeking other gods and copying the other nations of the world. Now the surprising thing is, which humanly speaking it is surprising, but when you understand God's omniscience it ought not to be surprising. The reality is that God knew when he chose Israel that they would indeed be a disappointment to him and that they would be a backsliding people. Now if you look at verse 4 and also again in verse 8, I want you to look for the words, I knew, because I knew that thou art obstinate, and thy neck is an iron sinew, and thy brow brass. And then in verse 8 again, for I knew that thou wouldest deal treacherously. And so all the while, God is taking these people for his own people, for his own glory, and he was quite aware, indeed like Hosea, who took an adulterous wife, and he knew her history, he knew her tendencies to be treacherous and unfaithful, and yet he was commanded to take such a wife, and that was a reflection of what God was doing with Israel. And so we ought not to be totally surprised when we discover that God's people are not always consistent